And joining us in studio, Carl Niehaus, MKMVA NEC member, and Professor Sipho Seepe, political analyst, Lakhitekisho, Transform RSA deputy president. Gentlemen, thanks so much for your time. I mean, the disclaimer on this 13-page document around the prospects for and implications of Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma win, it says that it is for internal use, not to be distributed publicly, but we know it's now in the public domain. What does this report intend to do? Its objectives, in your view, Professor Seepe?
Well, it is, first, it acknowledges a possibility that's of Nkosazana Zuma becoming the next president of the ANC. And with that, it then begins to move towards scare tactics. Because what you need to understand is that those who are controllers of the economy and those who have made sure that the black people in general are marginal to that economy would not take kindly to anybody who suggests that there's a need to broaden the participation of black people in that economy so that black people do not become simply onlookers, but they also assume the possibility of being the commanders of that economy. So what it is, it simply says we are against anything that talks about the transformation of the economy in this country. And Nkosazana Zuma is one of the few candidates who have actually come out very clear. There is nothing that she had said in a public posture in explaining radical economic transformation that is not located within the ANC. But some people are known to be the people who at the slightest opportunity may sell out of the agenda of the ANC. And those are those who have always enslaved black people, both materially and economically, would not want to see. They would not want to see any change. So what they would rather do, as it has happened under conditions of slavery, they would like to co-opt the house slaves who are going to police the rest of the slaves. Under apartheid, we had people who were co-opted to serve the masters to continue to suppress. So what the document is saying, and this is what black people must hear, the document is saying we fear this woman because this woman stands for the interest of black people. We want a black person who is going to protect white interest, white supremacy. And most importantly, these are the same people who will be telling you about Mandela. I must urge people to go back to read what Mandela says in the Rivonia speech, to say the biggest challenge of South Africans and South African politics is white supremacy. And unfortunately, we dropped the ball instead of addressing that matter.
Professor Seepe, I think, in your paraphrasing, what comes out is that the Standard Bank report is pro Cyril Ramaphosa and anti Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, but they go on to malign her in the sense that she will then continue the narrative of corruption and cronyism as per the allegations against President Jacob Zuma. Is this, in your view, a direct attempt to influence the outcome of the elective conference in December?
Absolutely, Cindy. And it's also an indication that Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma are doing the right things. Because Standard Bank stands for the status quo. They stand for white monopoly capitalism. They have themselves made themselves guilty of severe collusion in this country. And they have to be kept responsible for those activities. Now they do not want to see radical economic transformation in South Africa. And because they do not want to see it, they come up with a report that they try to present to us as a so-called academic report. It is the greatest load of hogwash. It is a compilation of prejudiced ideas and newspaper cuttings. This particular person who has put this report together is not worth his salt being called a so-called senior economist. What we have is a piece of propaganda to undermine Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, to decampaign her, and to promote Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa. That is the reality. And we need to start calling it by the name. And we need to ask ourselves, why is Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma being maligned by reports like this and by banks with the checkered record that Standard Bank has, And the answer is because she challenges the fundamentals of white monopoly capitalism. They know that she has a policy that she's going to implement. They know that she's an effective administrator, and they know that she's a woman of her word. And they want to stop her, and they want to stop her at all costs.
Okay, let's look at the role of the bank, or whether it should meddle in politics, and in whose best interest is it for this particular report to be circulated? Retekishu.
No, thanks. Obviously, the bank should be able to do its work as a bank, but of course, considering the circumstances and all of that. But in this instance, the report is such that it's biased. It's biased in the sense that it campaigned for NDZ and then it campaigns for CR. Now, when it does that, it therefore want to be part of the whole scenario of the campaigning. Now, we used to, at the university, being student leaders, and when a white freedom front organization agrees with us, we would have a problem with that because we know they have an interest in whatever we want. So we would really worry to say, no, but why must Freedom Front agree with us on this matter? Because Freedom Front is an organization that fights for white people and the status quo. So in this instance, when this report is out, it worries us because it supports a candidate that is aligned with them, that is going to maintain the status quo. And we want people to be able to be aware that if a bank supports you, it's bad news. We must make it quite clear. It's bad news, and you cannot be supported.
They cite these reasons, though, that should Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma win in the December elective conference, that we can anticipate an outcome that would trigger a series of clear and mostly negative political and economic consequences, saying that she would continue with the Jacob Zuma cronyism, etc., and gearing towards a decline in our economy. Should that not be raising alarm bells, especially if this is directed to investors, and we know that the trajectory of our fiscus is quite poor?
One of the leading writers in journalism around these issues, Peter Bruce, has actually urged business people to engage Nkosazana Zuma. He says, instead of making statements and pigeonholing her, why don't you at least have the courage and treat her like a human being? The very same human being and woman of stature that saw Mr. Mandela, the first president, saying she's good enough to be among the first ministers of this country. The same person who Thabo Mbeki, when he was a president, felt that she's good enough to become a Minister of Foreign Affairs, to engage with world leaders. The same person that Kgalema Motlanthe felt that he was good enough. And none of them, and at that time, were raising issues around her association with anybody. She was a leader in her own right. So what we have here is a mischief, it's sexist, it's cowardly, but it's also one of those where you'd expect that people who claim to be non-racial, non-sexist, including those who are campaigning, Cyril Ramaphosa must actually stand up and say, I'm a member of the African National Congress, and the African National Congress has leadership, including Nkosazana, and I do not take kindly to this mischaracterization of her. He cannot allow, when he keeps silent, he's simply saying it is okay. It is okay when one of my own is maligned. And when you do that, you are not being a leader. A great leadership is that when others are attacked maliciously, and when you know it is untrue, a leader stands up and says, not in my name. So the bank has taken a position that in the name of Cyril, we are going to malign this woman, we are going to distort her history, we are going to actually show the most extreme form of chauvinism.
Does it also subvert the ANC internal processes and that of the branches being the backbone and decision makers when it comes to elections?
Yes, Standard Bank is trying to launch itself right into the politics of the African National Congress. And interestingly enough, this report is using the narrative that had also been used by the South African Communist Party, saying that if a particular candidate, and we all know that that candidate is Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa, doesn't get elected, then the ANC is probably going to split. Then the alliance is going to fall apart. Then all these terrible things are going to happen. So we have a narrative that is blackmail on the ANC and on the branches of the ANC. But let's look at what the report says are the terrible things that Comrade Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma is going to do. She's going to introduce free education. Wow. That is such a terrible thing for a country such as ours, where we need to get our children to be properly educated. She's going to address some of the economic imbalances. She's going to address the issues around financial institutions, which, as we know, are working for white monopoly capital and not for the majority of people. All of those things, these are the fears that they express. But you know, those fears are exactly the hopes of the majority of South Africans. So the message that has to be carried out is what the bank fears is exactly what needs to happen in South Africa if we want for the majority of our people a future. And Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma had said so clearly, she is not there to destabilize South Africa. She is deeply concerned about the instability that is caused by the huge gap between rich and poor, by all the inequality. And she time after time said, radical economic transformation has to mean that we address what is unsustainable and the status quo cannot be sustained, and that will bring hope for every South African, white and black. But Standard Bank comes with fear-mongering and trying to stoke on fear amongst the people of South Africa and trying to demonize this woman who wants to bring stability and who wants to bring justice in the South African continent.
Could there be unintended consequences as well in looking at the impact when it comes to the voter base? Largely, the report suggests that rural areas are okay, supporting NDZ, but there could be a cleavage or a split in the voter, urban vote.
You
for
see,
the
all
ANC.
they want to do is divisive. They try to break the ANC up into a rural urban organization rather than deal with the issues that she wants to stretch. The important thing that we have to face here is that Standard Bank is out to try and destroy ultimately the African National Congress. And they don't mind using a particular candidate in order to do so. If they can get that candidate to run with a set of policies that will eventually lead to instability in South Africa but continue to serve white monopoly capital, they will have and they will do so. The important thing now is for Comrade Cyril Ramaphosa, and I agree absolutely with Professor Siepe, to come out clearly and announce this report. And if he doesn't announce it, the question must be asked, is he in fact competent to become a future leader and president of South Africa?
What's the level of comfort that Standard Bank would have with CR17?
You see, obviously they will be very happy because then it means their preferred candidate would have made it. But here is the challenge, because he is talking about a one-sided issue, you know, of CR having to make it, and it does not necessarily say if NDZ make it, they can, if CR make it, there will be an instability as well. You know, you just look at what NDZ is going to happen when she wins. But when CR wins, does he not be able to think about the issue of instability that may also occur? Because what NDZ is trying to help, like correctly stated by Comrade Carl here, is to say we must be able to help in terms of sharing this economy that is there. And if we are not going to do that, what will happen to the masses of our people that are so poor? Can they also uprise or self-help at some point? And that is what Comrade NDZ is trying to prevent. But they don't talk about it because it's not in their interest. They only talk about one-sided issues.
Okay, yeah. Professor Zip.
I think the most important thing that black people in this country must take is to refuse to fall into this dichotomy of the devils that needs to be demonized and the angels. If you look at the track record of Nkosazana, it doesn't have the many scandals that some people have, that the media has tried to suppress. Instead, with Nkosazana-Zuma, what they are trying to do, they are trying to create them. They're trying to imagine them. And then they put out there. You have pictures that all ministers take with any people without even knowing what those people are. And that becomes the basis. So South Africans must not fall into that trap. Nkosazana, including other people, are people of good standing. And we do not say that she must actually win per force. But what some of us are saying is that if there is a game to be played, let it be played fairly. But what is important and what should be very clear is that under conditions of oppression, Standard Bank was not there with us. That is very important. And we should ask ourselves why suddenly they seem to be caring so much about black people. So that is an issue that we must reflect on. But most importantly, we should actually be saying, as Peter Bruce was saying, if you want to hear her views, talk to her. Stop pigeonholing her. But what we have now is that they have tried to create a caricature of Jacob Zuma, the president, as this devil. And anybody who's associated with that person. So all members of the ANC who are seen to be supportive of Nkosazana-Zuma are presented as little devils. And that is what South Africans
And we know that these splits,
reject.
yes, also those contradictions exist within the party in the various slates, etc. But under Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, part of the report also says that the caliber of leadership would have eroded further as we have seen in the current administration. Your view?
Well, really? Are we saying that Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma is not a capable leader and that she will not put together a team of people who are capable? I believe that she will put together a very capable team of people. And if we look at Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma's record, she's been one of the most effective administrators in government over 3 different ministries. None of that is being said. All we get to hear is that there will be a decline in administration, not an understanding of what she stands for, how effective she was, and how effective we can expect her to be in terms of implementation of radical economic transformation. Now, Cindy, I can tell you why we get these stories. Because Standard Bank and the white monopoly capitalist friends are deeply concerned exactly about the effectiveness of Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma to translate policy into practice. And they're deeply concerned about the commitment that she had made from branch to branch throughout the length and breadth of this country, where I've heard her many times say, we've had radical economic transformation as our official ANC policy since 2012, since Mangaung, but we've not properly implemented it. And then the next step that she went into, and she did so extensively, for instance, at her speech at Gibbs a couple of weeks ago, she explains clear, practical implementation. And that is when the trouble starts for Standard Bank, because they can see how that practical implementation from an effective administrator is truly going to change the power dynamics in South Africa and is going to empower the majority and especially African people. And they don't want that.
Let's look at what you say as the ANC policy in radical economic transformation. We've seen ministers almost subvert or going around the point, whether you call it economic growth or economic transformation, leaving out the radical aspect of it. And I think Dr. Dlamini-Zuma is the only one that's come out boldly to call it what it is. But here's what the report says. It says that under this particular umbrella, downgrades are inevitable. Patronage will continue into the market. She will also not give Malusi Gigaba the room to implement a more pragmatic approach to SOE reforms. Just your response to that.
No, but that's propaganda. That is not going to happen. I'm saying these guys are not genuine. They're pushing a particular agenda. But in conclusion, as correctly stated by my colleagues, you see, this thing is linked with the broader issue of Comrade Zuma, President Zuma. Now, what they want to do and seem to be doing is by writing this book by illegitimate people that we know are racist, does not like blacks, And they want to convince us, come with propaganda for us to change our view on the current situation and people that are going to help us. And we are saying we cannot be dictated by these books that they write about our leaders, because they don't know us and we know what we want.
Have you read the book, though?
No, I have seen that book.
Which version? Gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. I'm going to have to leave it there.
Well,
we're out of time.
Fiction.
Carl Niehaus,
dictated by
NEC
these
member,
books.
Professor Siphosiape, political analyst, and Lakit Tekisho, Transform RSA Deputy President. Thanks so much for staying with us. Up next, ANC Decides with Mfundo Mapalane.